Welcome to Marketplace Tech Bytes. It's our weekly roundup of some of the big stories making headlines in tech. I'm Meghan McCarty, Carino. This week, we'll get into the latest on the TikTok ban. Trump urged the Supreme Court to put it on pause. OpenAI's latest model could be the next step toward artificial general intelligence. And we'll give our take on one tech trend to watch in 2025. Here to discuss all that is our regular contributor, Paresh Dave from Wired. Hey, Paresh, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Meghan.
So good to see you. Well, as always, we're going to kick things off with our Byte of the Week. This is a number that gives us some insight into our top stories. Paresh, do you have a number that we should know this week?
I've got to start the year off with my favorite number, 3. So 3 new states have, as of this week, put in place age verification laws to access pornography. So that brings the total now to 17. So that includes Florida, Tennessee, and South Carolina. And in Florida, on top of that, there's, the requirement, as you've talked about before, that, children now need like age verification, to use social media. It's getting complicated out there. And all of this is sort of still going through the courts and being settled, which I think we'll talk a little bit more about soon too.
Yeah, so this has, of course, been a contentious legal issue in the courts, TBD on how those new state laws will go. But we wanted to kind of circle back to another legal development that happened toward the end of the year. And that is an update on the TikTok ban. Maybe of special interest to about 170 million users in the US. This ban could take place as soon as this month. The Supreme Court had already agreed to take up a challenge to this federal law that requires the Chinese owners of TikTok to divest from the app by January 19th or face a ban. And toward the end of the year, December 27th, the president-elect weighed in, as he is wont to do. Donald Trump urged the Supreme Court to put that ban on hold. Paresh, what do you make of this?
It's sort of interesting. I kind of give the president-elect some credit here. Like, courts generally do want things to be settled, right? Courts have a huge backlog. They don't like to decide things and weigh in if they aren't really needed, right? Like, courts in some ways see themselves as the last resort. And the president-elect here is saying that, he can find a resolution that the Biden administration has been unable to sort of find with TikTok and maybe other parties and ByteDance. And, if Trump can reach a negotiated settlement, ultimately, isn't that sort of, what the courts generally want? So I'm guessing that the Supreme Court, may take his sort of plea seriously, especially since come January 20th, right? His administration is going to be in charge of enforcing the law. Like, what happens if they don't enforce it? I mean, that's going to be sort of weird too.
And so is the settlement he's sort of proposing that he can find a buyer, he can sort of negotiate, his sort of talent that he touts, he can kind of, make this sale happen, but maybe he needs some time as president to do that.
Exactly. Or if not a sale, maybe some more conditions on how TikTok is able to operate in the US sort of safely while maintaining some ties to ByteDance, whatever it may be. The awkward and sort of challenging thing here is, let's say the Supreme Court, moves forward with hearing these arguments on January 10th. The law goes into effect January 19th. Trump takes, office January 20th. There's sort of a limited window to do that negotiating. But you could imagine that the way things sound right now, there will be, basically no immediate enforcement, I think is what to read into this. But you have to remember that, the law really requires parties that are working with TikTok to do something. So the law says that distributors like the Google Play App Store, Apple's App Store can't provide sort of, services to TikTok. And those companies are going to be scared about being in violation of the law come January 20th. And I don't think sort of like Trump saying, I'm not going to enforce it is going to give them a lot of comfort. And that's the challenging sort of negotiating thing that TikTok is in
Mhm.
right now.
And the politics on this are not super straightforward. I mean, we heard from another figure in Trump world, Ajit Pai, the former FCC head under Trump 1.0, who said he supports the Supreme Court moving ahead with the ban. I mean, there are a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah, I mean, right, Trump's reasoning or sort of little bit of about face on TikTok was like he doesn't want Facebook to have more power because he
Right.
doesn't, trust Mark Zuckerberg. And but there are still plenty of conservatives who are concerned about the China
Yeah.
aspect, and so is Trump at a time. So that's why it's especially hard for any of those companies who may be considered in violation of the law on January 20th, and providing support to TikTok. They're going to be concerned because they really don't know what to make of what lawmakers think, what the Trump administration thinks.
All right, now let's move on to some big AI news that came just before Christmas. OpenAI announced a new family of reasoning models called O3. This is an improvement upon the O1 reasoning models that came before. And according to some internal testing that OpenAI released, the new model performed at human level on several benchmark tests and kind of blew previous high performers out of the water. Of course, this has to come with some grains of salt. The models are not available for independent evaluation yet. OpenAI says that will start this month with the sort of smaller version of the O3. But first, Paresh, I mean, maybe we should kind of explain like what is a reasoning model, or I guess Google calls something similar that they have a thinking model. How is this different from kind of the chat GPTs of the world?
Yeah, the way OpenAI explains it is like the model is taught to think before providing an output. So, it's not just looking at sort of the words that you've inputted and then repeating a pattern out that sort of makes sense. It's repeating that pattern out, sort of digesting what it has initially thought to say, and sort of talking to itself, which we would describe as sort of reasoning, right? Putting our brain to work, and saying, does that really make sense? Is this something I should really say? And what this, at least OpenAI says, what this
Mhm.
allows is that you can solve more complex sort of logic puzzles or math puzzles, because it's sort of like this two-step process, and you're kind of trying to lay out those steps as you go through it. So I think that's very powerful. Is that something that is artificial general intelligence, I think, is the question.
Right. So this has come up because one of the tests that it performed extremely well, getting 85% on, is this ARC AGI evaluation, which the kind of designers of this test note this does not say whether it's AGI or not. It's just kind of, supposed to track, progress toward AGI, artificial general intelligence. But according to OpenAI, it scored 85%, which is at kind of human level. It also scored very high on these complex math and coding tests. I mean, what do you make of, I mean, what are the implications of this kind of leap in artificial intelligence?
But there's a lot of things that these benchmarks don't measure, right?
Right.
Humans are also capable of like decent amount of memory and sort of remembering the context of something that happened yesterday or years before. Certainly, OpenAI models have sort of memory capabilities, but we don't really have a good way of measuring right now, sort of or comparing models against each other on their ability to remember things or have that context, and have that continuity in thought and approach. And that's a very important human sort of function in how we reason and how we think. So it's hard to say that we are anywhere close to AGI when we don't even have ways of measuring some of these basic things that humans do. We don't have ways of sort of comparatively measuring them in machine form. So to me, like, it's great that these models are more capable of, uh, you know, figuring out, how many apples, Susie has if you take five away from her and give six to Jack, and, whatever the complicated math puzzle is. Um, but that doesn't really help me, I don't know, talk to my mom better and try to remember what she said 5 days ago, and sort of have this continuous conversation with her. This model isn't really going to help with that, I would say.
All right, now we want to ask you, Paresh, to play a little kind of crystal ball with us and tell us which tech trend you're going to be watching closely in 2025.
Well, the thing I'm going to be watching closely is just what we were talking about, right? These models becoming more powerful. What OpenAI, what Google have talked about is that they want these models to start to connect to services on the internet and provide services on behalf of, or sort of complete tasks on behalf of users, what they would call agentic AI. Not to continue to be a downer here, but I'm not so optimistic that the hype or the hope for how these agents perform this year is going to pan out very well. I've lived through a few of these cycles of different technologies like Google Assistant, or even Alexa, where it was supposed to connect to all your other services and make it really easy to do things on your behalf. You were supposed to shop right from Alexa. I
Hmm.
don't think there's that much shopping happening through Alexa. And I don't think the services that need to be connected to, right? It's not just the models themselves that need capabilities. It's also all these services you're connecting to. At
Right.
Wired, we've tried out a bunch of travel agent
Hmm.
AIs, right, that try to help you plan travel. And the suggestions just aren't great. I mean, it's not something you can trust 100%, and I don't think we're going to get there this year. But I'm excited to follow those developments.
All right, and we will have you back to talk about those developments, see how your predictions pan out. Paresh Dave at Wired. Thanks so much. Good to see you.
Thanks, Megan.
And thanks to all of you for joining us for Marketplace Tech Bytes Week in Review. Daniel Shin produced this episode. I'm Meghan McCarty Carino. This is APM.